Welcome everyone. My name is Sarah and I'm from CrossCut Irish Diaspora Support Project. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar on going to Australia, backpacking and working holidays for Irish citizens. We're going to be focusing on New South Wales today, and we're delighted to have our partners from the Irish Support Agency over in Sydney joining us today, and they'll be sharing plenty of information with you that will hopefully be very useful. So what we'll be talking about today is who we are, what we do, preparing for departure, getting set up on your arrival. We'll be sharing some information on minding yourself once you're over in Australia, a little bit of information on regional work as well, if you're hoping to extend your working holiday visa into a second year. We'll touch a little bit on how and why people can run into difficulty, and hopefully that will help you not to do that. And then we'll also be sharing our contact details at the end. We'll have a Q&A at the end, and we'd ask you to pop your questions in the chat box as we go along as well. We'd ask that you keep your microphone muted and switch off your camera if you prefer not to be visible. Slides will be available after the webinar, and the recording of the webinar will also be on our YouTube channel. So just to tell you a little bit about the two organisations running the event today, as I said, I work with CrossCut Irish Diaspora Support Project. We're based in Dublin, and we provide information advocacy support to Irish people who are both leaving the country, like yourselves, and Irish people moving home from abroad. We're made up of a small team. My colleague Niall Foster is also joining us today. And we're funded by the Emigrant Support Programme, which is a funding programme from the Government of Ireland that funds both ourselves and the Irish Support Agency in Sydney. So the Irish Support Agency New South Wales, Inc. has been supporting the Irish community in Sydney since 1995, and indeed the broader New South Wales area. They provide frontline support to anyone in the Irish Australian community who needs support, potentially because they're in distress, or also to connect them in with events that they run and social activities and so on. We're joined today by Una McCrussell, who's going to be going through some of the information today, and Katrina Gillen, who will also be talking a little bit about minding yourself and so on when you're over in Australia. We'll be sharing contact details at the end, so you do have them. Feel free to reach out to the team if you have a question that you think of after today's session. So I'll hand over to Una.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you for that, and great to be here this evening. So starting off with preparing for departure. Now, obviously, when you make the decision to emigrate to Australia, you know, it's a good idea to give yourself plenty of time to do your research. And that research will include your planned destination. So perhaps you've really identified the city or the suburb that you would like to live in. Maybe you've got some friends already here. And even if that is the case, still take the time to research where you're going. Will it offer you the lifestyle that you're looking for? What's the job market like? What's the quality of life here like? It's also a really good idea to have your accommodation organised for the first few weeks. At the moment in Sydney, we are experiencing huge demand for rental properties, but also for shared room accommodation. So we would definitely recommend that you have some accommodation organised for, say, 3 to 4 weeks when you first arrive. Things like you can, you know, book a hostel. Obviously, you can stay with friends if they're open to that. But it's a really good idea not to wait until you land at Sydney Airport to think about your accommodation. Check out the jobs market. Depending on what industry you're in, there's a couple of places that you can look at to see what the demand is like for certain roles.
Hi.
And also, I know that Australia is sort of well known as a place of you know, plenty of opportunities, but certain industries will have greater demands than others. So just make sure that with your skill set, your qualifications, that there is sufficient jobs out there for you when you arrive. Find out a little bit about the local culture and clubs. So what does the local community look like in your planned destination? So for example, in Sydney, there's multiple Irish community groups, GAA clubs, and if that's something that isn't going to be important to you in terms of getting settled, then take a bit of time to figure out what's available. Is it going to be easy to meet people, such that you'll be able to establish a good support network when you get over here. Learn a little bit about how the local systems and institutions work. So luckily in Australia, a lot of the way that systems are set up, it's quite similar to Ireland, but there are obviously going to be some differences. So just take a little bit of time to research what those differences might be. Is it going to make things particularly difficult for you to get established? You know, I know in Ireland you've got things like PPS number and things like that. So just, you know, use your research time to figure out what it's going to take to get you established. Then in terms of networking, obviously knowing people over here before you come would be a great thing to have. But if you don't know anyone over here, start joining some of the social groups and organizations before you leave. So you can touch base with them, you can let them know that you're coming over. And honestly, you know, I have witnessed that the social groups and organizations over here are very welcoming to newcomers. And if you reached out to them, they'd be delighted to hear from you. They're always looking for new members. So that would be a really solid thing to do if you didn't have any prior connections here. And then in terms of employment, contact people who work in the same job sector. So things like LinkedIn is a really good place to connect to people in different industries. And it just might give you a flavor for the job market, but also what the culture of workplaces are before you come. Check your essential documents. This is one that can catch a lot of people out. So obviously you need to have a valid passport, but you do need to have 6 months validity on it. And a lot of the airlines will turn you away if you don't have that 6 months validity on it. Birth certificate, I know that, you know, having your original copy of your birth certificate can be really scary. So, you know, if it's a case that you don't want to take that with you, consider taking a photocopy of it. But it's still, you know, it's recognized over here as a valid piece of documentation. And then your appropriate visa. So, you know, make sure that you've printed off your letter of approval from the Department of Immigration. Once your visa is approved, you'll receive an email. It'll generally be in a PDF format. So make sure you print a copy of that off and have everything you know, sort of to take with you. Also a good idea to take some pay slips, payment summaries, and proof of your Irish address. Our advice is take more than you think you might need because you don't want to be over here and wish you had have taken something. So other good documents to take with you are things like any qualifications that you may have, certificates, diplomas, degrees, academic transcript, trades qualifications, references from employers. This is a really big one because in terms of applying for work, because of the time difference between Ireland and Australia, you know, if Australian companies are calling Irish employers, it can be quite tricky to coordinate with the time difference. So written references are a really good idea to bring with you. Copy of your driver's license and the others there as well. Travel insurance. So it's always a good idea to travel with travel insurance, and comprehensive travel insurance is going to be the one that's going to cover your overseas medical costs, including medical repatriation and evacuation. You should also check any exclusions and ensure that your policy covers you for the activities that you want to take. So we know a lot of backpackers come over here and they might want to travel up the east coast of Australia, and they might want to engage in some, you know, sort of high octane activities. I know that up in Queensland, that's very popular with backpackers. So just with anything, just make sure that the policy that you take out is going to cover you for any of those type of activities. Certain visas require you to have mandatory health insurance, but at the moment that will only really apply to student visas in this instance, but it's just generally a good thing to get. So once you get here and getting set up on arrival, having adequate funds, and this can be one that really catches people out, because yes, Australia is an expensive place to live, and I know when you first come over here, there can be a bit of that shock factor as to, how much more expensive it may seem to Ireland. So it's always a good idea to have more money than you think you will need. And I know in the lead up to going to Australia, you can get very caught up in the excitement of going, and you may not be solely focused on trying to build up that those level of funds, but I really would advise you to take more than you think you will need. So for example, take a fund for the worst case scenario. Say you don't get a job in the time frame that you had allocated for. Bear in mind also that when you rent a property over here, the majority of properties are not going to be furnished. So you are going to need to have some money to get yourself a bed and a mattress and a fridge and a washing machine. So all of those things will need to be factored in. It's a good idea, especially if you're still planning on using your Irish bank account. I know a lot of the apps now require two-factor authentication. So just make sure that the mobile number that you have attached to the app, you still have access to it, or change the mobile number with your bank before you come. Register for online banking, which most people will do. And then once you get yourself set up, you've paid your bond, you've sorted out your lease, keep some money aside for an emergency fund, because you never know what may happen. And we always say a good sort of guideline is enough for a return flight home. SIM cards, very standard. The majority of, if you're taking a mobile phone with you, make sure that it's unlocked and that you'll be able to put an Australian SIM card into it, because getting it unlocked can be a little bit of a pain here. Standard providers, you can get prepaid, you can signing up for a bill requires quite a lot of documentation. They will need proof of address. So it may not be suitable if you're, just still getting set up, and getting a SIM card is probably going to be one of the first things that you do. So you can start calling employers, you can start, communicating with your friends. But you can get SIM cards. There's phone shops, there's Vodafone, there's Telstra, there's Optus. You can get SIM cards from newsagents, supermarkets, and you can get, a pay-as-you-go for $20. It's pretty straightforward. So opening a bank account. So opening a bank account, the way that they do it here is through a point system to verify who you are. So obviously you're going to need a few forms of identification. So your passport, your photo driving license, a national identity card from your home country, such like the age card. And if you don't have this, you can use your birth certificate. So for things like the passport, the driving license, they all carry, I think, about 70 points. And then the secondary ID documents, I think they're about maybe 20 points. So things like a utility bill, but again, if you're newly arrived, you may not have that. Medicare card, which many of you may not have. Notice from the ATO, that could be a good one, because applying for your tax file number is relatively straightforward. But just be prepared to, and that's why the planning and the research is really important, because you want to be able to go into the bank and have all of those things ready to go. So it's straightforward. So yeah, so that's opening a bank account. Once you have all the documentation, it's actually very straightforward to do. You go into the branch and they can get it set up and running for you with, you know, relatively short space of time. Some of the banks actually will allow you to open a bank account before you come over here. So that's something that you could potentially look at, but that will still then require you to go into the branch once you arrive, just to show your ID, and then they can activate it for you. So as I said, tax file number. So the tax file number is, in some ways, that's your tax file number that they analyze the amount of tax that you're going to owe based on the money that you earn. So you can apply for a tax file number online, and those on working holiday visa must apply for a tax file number. Everyone has to pay tax. Visit the ATO website, that's the Australian Tax Office, and just make sure that your prospective employer is registered to hire working holiday makers, and your employer is obliged by law to give you an employee declaration form. So that's that form there on the right-hand side, relatively straightforward to complete. However, one of the questions that can often catch people out is in regards to, are you a resident for tax purposes? And even though you're not technically an Australian resident, you're still a resident for tax purposes. So make sure that you tick yes for that. There on the ATO website, there's quite a lot of guidelines and information about answering the questions that are outlined. In terms then of superannuation, so what is superannuation? So superannuation was introduced in Australia in the mid-80s, and it is the mandatory pension scheme for for all Australians. And what it means is when you are employed, your employer is required to make super contributions on your behalf. So it's not coming out of your pay packet. It's going to be you won't even see your super. It is sort of siphoned off into a super account, which is held by a super company of your nomination. A lot of different super companies over here, and they'll offer different benefits and different fees. A lot of employers will have their preferred super company, and a lot of people tend to just go with that one without the need for doing a huge amount of research on it. So working holiday visa makers earn superannuation. And at the moment, it's 10% of your annual salary. And that is actually due to go up in the not so distant future. Okay. Yeah. And then just in terms of a lot of people ask, well, I don't want to live in Australia permanently. I'm only coming over for a couple of years. Can I reclaim my super once I leave? And for working holiday visa makers, the answer is yes. However, be aware that you're going to be taxed quite significantly on it. So if there's $10,000 in your super account when you leave, expect to get a percentage of that back. They are going to tax you on it. But there's a form that you can fill out to claim your super if you know that you're definitely not coming back to Australia, and then you can take that home with you. The great thing about Ireland and Australia is they've got a reciprocal healthcare agreement. So Australia holds this with a number of countries around the world. And what it basically means is that for emergency healthcare, Irish citizens are going to be covered under this healthcare agreement. Now, bear in mind, it is for emergency situations. Cover is provided for the duration of the visitor's approved stay in Australia, and subsidised pharmaceuticals under the PBS scheme are also included in the cover. So that's your emergency healthcare. So that's, you know, if you're in a serious accident or illness, you're going to receive that treatment. However, it is important to note that people residing in Northern Ireland are eligible for Medicare, which subsidises medical care in the community setting. So that's your GP visits. So to apply for Medicare, again, it's an online system. Everything is digitized over here. You will need to provide your relevant identity documentations, a copy of your current visa, and you'll then be issued with a Medicare card. And when you go to the GP, you hand over your Medicare card and then you get a rebate on that GP appointment. Working holiday visas from the Republic of Ireland are unfortunately not eligible for Medicare. So that means then they will need to pay the upfront cost going to a GP and any other kind of medical services. Medicare also extends to things like x-rays, you know, things like that. So once you have that Medicare for Northern Ireland residents, there's quite a lot of benefits that come with that. Next slide, please. Okay, so accommodation. So costs have risen dramatically over recent months. They started to increase quite steadily since we came out of the COVID pandemic. And there is a lot of competition to secure a lease. So in saying that, in terms of the competition, you kind of want to present yourself as a really positive candidate for securing that lease. So think about letters, tenancy letters from previous landlords. Think about showing your rental history, your rental payment history. Having a copy of those is really beneficial if you're going to secure a lease. Obviously, you can look at share rooms. Maybe you know some people already over here who have a room to rent. The places that you can look for accommodation, you've got real estate and domain, and therefore leasing entire units and apartments. But things like flatmates and flatmate finders are good places for individual and share rooms. There's a Facebook group over here called Irish Around Sydney. And I think at this point, it's got about 90,000 members in the Facebook group, but it's a really popular place for people to post rooms available, but people also post about looking for accommodation. There's also a new group over here called Lost and Found in Sydney, and they've actually got a dedicated accommodation section that you can trawl through and look for rooms that are available. So yeah, so it is tough. The majority of people who are finding accommodation now seems to be through word of mouth and knowing people or knowing when someone might be leaving. So obviously people are sort of constantly coming and going to go and do their regional work. So even you might be able to get a place for, say, 3 months while that person is away, and that gives you a bit of breathing room to then find something more long term. So I really would recommend the Facebook groups. It just adds a little bit more of a personal touch to it, and knowing someone will really stand in your favor there. Just in terms of once you establish your lease and once you find a place and you're going to take it on, it's really important. They're quite strict on leases over here. So you have to really make sure that once you take occupation of the apartment or unit, that you're taking a lot of photographs of the current condition of the apartment, because once you give up your lease and you vacate that place, they will penalise you for anything that has not been previously reported. And in terms of also the cleanliness of the apartment, they are extremely strict. So a lot of people here actually end up hiring end of lease cleaners because they want to make sure that they're getting their bond back. And make sure that you know your rights. Make sure that you do read your lease and make sure you know what you're signing up for. Make sure you know when your rent is due. Because the competition is so high, you don't want to give them any reason for denying you or for asking you to leave. Next slide, please. So getting around, it's actually really easy to get around Sydney, even though it's quite a large city. They've got multiple modes of public transport. I personally find I use public transport the majority of the time, and I find it fantastic for getting where I need to go. You've got train, you've got bus, you have light rail, and you also have ferry services, which connect you all around the coast and then across the bridge to the north side of Sydney. So you've got an Opal card. I know that there's a similar system in Dublin. It's like you tap on and you tap off. You can top these up in newsagents, supermarkets, and you tap on once you get on, and then you tap off once you come off, and it's very straightforward. They have introduced where you can start using your bank card to tap on and off, but it must have PayWave on it for that to work. But it's a good thing to know as well, especially when you're choosing where you're going to live. Figure out what the public transport links are like in and around that area, because not every place will be serviced by the train and the bus and the light rail. So some will have either or. So just make sure that you know, that where you're choosing to base yourself is going to make it accessible to reach other places like the city or whatnot. So in terms of driving license, if you're a tourist or temporary overseas visitor, you can drive in New South Wales using your overseas license. As long as you remain a temporary overseas visitor, have a current license, and have not been disqualified from driving in New South Wales or anywhere else. So if you've lost your license in Ireland, obviously you're not going to be able to use that over here. And you've not had your license suspended. So but you can only use your Irish driver's license whilst you're on that temporary overseas visitor. Driving in Sydney is it can be very busy, but once you get used to the roads, there's a lot of freedom in being able to drive to different locations. If you're thinking of buying a car, you obviously need compulsory third-party insurance. You need what's called rego, which is your car tax. This can be paid annually or every 3 months. Can be pretty expensive. It depends on your car, and it usually comes down to the amount of emissions that they deem your car to emit. Use the facility to have pre-purchase inspection by independent mechanic. Yes, next slide, please. So in terms of finding work, obviously we have very similar kind of job portals like Indeed. I know you have that in Ireland. Seek is probably one of the biggest ones here, and Career One. There's also industry-specific recruitment agencies here. The ISA, also have our own list of known companies that recruit Irish people. A lot of these companies will be Irish owned, and we can definitely make some referrals depending on what the industry is. Don't forget to consider the lead time for approval of qualifications. And this has actually caught quite a few people out, especially in the healthcare industry, because they are so detail orientated around, transfer of qualifications. It is, I believe, something that you can do. You can sort of put the wheels in motion before you arrive. So it might be something that you want to think about. Depending on the industry, there are other sort of mini qualifications that you can gain, such as responsible service of alcohol. So in Australia, to work in any licensed premises, so whether that be a bar, a pub, a restaurant that serves alcohol, a cinema that serves alcohol, anywhere where there's alcohol being served, you must have an RSA. And an RSA is a one-day course, costs about $100 to complete. And the reason that they introduced this was to try to minimize, over-serving people alcohol and knowing when to identify when someone may be intoxicated. And your white card then for the construction industry. Some resume tips for the Australian market, and we did get these from a recruitment consultant here. So a 2-page CV is the standard here. That's plenty. That's definitely plenty. Personal summary bio at the top, include your visa status. And that's really important because people want to know how long you're potentially going to be available to work for them. Whether you're going to up sticks and go home after a month. So it's always a good idea to include your visa status, but also to let them know a little bit about what your plans are. List your education first, uni, then secondary school, employment history, obviously your most recent role first, and work back from there, and keep it very short and succinct. Do not include hobbies and personal time. And ensure to bring your soft and hard copies like diplomas and certs and degrees for recruitment agencies. Okay.
So my name's Katrina. I'm the outreach worker at the Irish Support Agency. So I just want to talk a little bit to minding yourself. And we're going to start with before you leave. So look, myself and Una and many others have all been there in terms of moving away and leaving home. So these are just a few quick tips. So look, main thing, let's start with, don't try to say goodbye to everyone. It's impossible. And you probably would not see half these people if you were living at home, is what I think. In them final few weeks and days, it can be pretty overwhelming and emotional. So just try and spend some time with your nearest and dearest. And what I find really important and what we advise is, especially with parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles that you are really close with and might not be tech savvy, do little dummy runs with them, make sure that they've got a smartphone or they've got an iPad or laptop and that they know how to work that. Do lots of tests because when you come here, it's really important to be able to maintain that communication and for your family and friends back home to know that you're safe and you're well. So I think that's really important to just have WhatsApp or something similar on their phones so that you can keep in touch easily. Be prepared that you may find it difficult after arriving, and goodbye is not forever. I think that's really important to remind everyone of that. You might be home on a holiday in a year's time or next Christmas. Obviously you don't need to have these things planned straight away, but I think that always helps family and grandparents. When you're leaving, that this isn't forever. There is going to be a time when they'll see you again soon, all being well. And Crosscare actually have got a fantastic resource. It's called Mind How You Go. So please have a look on their website for that, because that resource is designed to support you through various practical and emotional challenges and all of the things that come with emigrating. So yeah, after you arrive then, so once you come to New South Wales, we would say first thing to keep in mind is broaden your social circle of friends and networks. Don't just limit yourself to maybe the few friends that you may know here from your village or town or city back home, although that's really brilliant to help you settle in. You know, people do move around here, they go off to do their regional work. So if you set a very small social circle, I think that can kind of set you up for a little bit of failure, because them first goodbyes when people leave can be quite challenging. So it's good to have a few different groups and networks. And yeah, developing a support structure and routine, like that's going to be really important to help you settle in. And as I said before, staying connected to home. So look, even if that's set in a particular day or time, obviously with the time difference sometimes, and with family and friends working back home, that can be pretty difficult. But, you know, if you say, I'm going to ring you on a Sunday, Sunday night with me, Sunday lunchtime with you, and we'll have a bit of a check in and catch up, that's going to do everyone the world of good. And pushing yourself to meet new people. You know, that's the point of coming to Australia, is to try and broaden your horizons. And there may be people from different cultures. You know, Australia's an amazing multicultural place. So there's a lot of backpackers from other countries here, and outside of that, people that you could meet through work, through certain social groups. And as we've said, checking out the local sports clubs or groups. So as Una had referred to before, that may be something that's really key to helping you settle in. So for example, if you play GAA or rugby or soccer back in Ireland, that may be the one really important thing for you to look into, either before you go or as soon as you come here. But you don't have to be, you know, a GAA player at home in order to get set up here, and with the other sports as well. They always welcome newcomers for a lot of the time. It's a social thing, and they're really supportive, and they can become like one big family. And that's actually, those networks are really helpful. As Una said, it's all about the people that you meet. So within them sports teams, they'll all have their private WhatsApp groups or Facebook messengers, and people will put in job opportunities in there. They may be popping home for 2 months or off to do their regional work, and they would prefer that it's someone they know that's going to sublet their room and take care of it. So my advice is just say yes to every opportunity. That's what I done in my first 12 months. And it's amazing the people that you meet here and become very close friends with, and that will help you along the way. And as we've said, we've got lots of Irish contacts within the ISA and all the different groups that we've got. So they can be really useful. And often people that are here a long time like to show everyone the ropes, and we remember what it's like to first come here and struggle a little bit in them first few months and finding your way and just getting used to everything, even the public transport system, or finding an apartment. It can be a little bit overwhelming, so don't be afraid to ask for help. And the dealing with homesickness, so first thing, and it's really key, is give yourself time. You know, it, as I said over and over again, it can be so overwhelming. Don't expect every day to be a good day, and just remember that on the bad days, every day is not going to be like that either. You're more than welcome to call us up at the Irish Support Agency if there's something on your mind. And no question is a silly question either. That's something that I want to remind you all of, because as I said, we all started out at one point, and something that may be very easy to us or accessible may be difficult information for you to find. So we all have to start somewhere. So go easy on yourself and know that the ups and downs are normal, and give your permission to feel homesick as well. You know, it's not living the dream. It can be really tough to settle in somewhere, and it's a long way from home. So if you are having a tough day, know that that's okay, and know that everyone else that's emigrated and made the big move has had many of them days as well. Okay. So yeah, ways to look after your mental health. So this is something that our organization really pride ourselves on. It's your mental health and well-being is key. So if you have a look on our YouTube, and you'll be able to easily find that through links on our website, or if you type Irish Support Agency in there, we have a huge collection of DOHAS webinars. So they're monthly webinars that we've run over the last few years. We try and choose a different topic every time. They're really easy to understand. We have professionals on there. We've got people that have lived experience on whatever topic that may be, that have got some real life tips. So yeah, they're fantastic. And we run them on the first Monday of every month. And just keep an eye on our social media and you'll see them there. You're always welcome to pop on live. And if you can't make it live, the recordings are on our YouTube. So that's the first thing. What we also do at the ISA is host regular outreach events. So we have two brilliant opportunities to meet people. One is the book club. So that meets regularly, and there's a little WhatsApp group for that, and you can reach out to us to get included in that. And it's a fantastic get together for people in person to talk about the book, and it's more so socially as well, a lovely way to connect. And we also have the Ramblin' Irish group, walking group. So again, if you're new to Sydney, you're struggling to meet people, that's amazing. There's people from all ages that catch up. They live all over Sydney. They meet at the one destination, and it's a brilliant way to see some beautiful scenic parts of Sydney as well. So again, it's a social thing. You would be very surprised at who you could meet there and the opportunities that may present. And it's nice to get out and about and have a lovely walk with Irish company as well. And yeah, joining other social groups. So we've talked about what the ISA offer. We're very fortunate here within the Irish community to have some other amazing social groups. So we have W Now, and they meet all over Sydney. So that's a men's mental health group, and that's kind of for the over 30s or 35s, I would say. So they've got their own social media pages. There's also How's the Head, and they meet in Coogee on Saturday mornings. They do ice baths, they do swims, they do coffees. And there's also Irish Women Abroad, Sunrise Social. There is Lost and Found that Una had mentioned previously. So we have lots of links to these on our website. And as I'd referred to earlier as well, huge amount of sporting clubs within New South Wales GA, the Sydney Irish Rugby Club. And you don't even have to stick to something that you've done before, like even within the Australian community, depending on where you're living, like there's netball groups, there's five-a-side soccer, you know, there's wonderful ways to meet up and catch up with other people, depending on what your interests may be. And then we have some brilliant cultural groups. So we've got Colta Sydney, who just recently had the flat last week here, and it gets an amazing turnout. We have the Irish Language School, social groups like Lost and Found, Sydney Queer Irish that put on fantastic events. And you know, you don't have to know anyone to go to these. You can just turn up, get in touch with the group organisers via social media if you're a little bit nervous about attending. And even with Sydney Queer Irish, you don't have to be a part of the queer community to join their events. They're very welcoming and open to everyone. If you're coming here with kids, there's Irish family events in Sydney that started up in the last 12 months. They're fantastic. And look, for all information and resources, there's very little that you can't find on social media or online, either in Irish Around Sydney pages, Irish Around Oz, or if you're struggling, just come into the ISA and we're more than happy to link you to who you may need to find, okay?
Okay, so regional work. So you've got here, you've got your visa, you've got yourself set up, and now you want to extend your visa because you're enjoying life in Sydney so much. So how do you go about doing that? Well, for all working holiday visa holders from Ireland, they need to complete what is called 88 days of specified work. And a lot of people just refer to it as regional work or farm work. So the Australian government set up this program to really connect employers in rural Australia with the workforce, because not a lot of employees, it may not be their first choice for employment, and a lot of the rural employers were struggling to find people to come and work for them. So the Australian government said, okay, well, let's introduce this to people who want to continue their time in Australia. And having completed regional work myself, I can say that I was very lucky and I had a wonderful experience, and I'm so glad that I did it. So to be eligible for your second and now third working holiday visa, you must complete this work. So specified work, what does that mean? Specified industry and area of Australia. So if you go on to the link that is there, so that's the official link from the Department of Home Affairs. They outline all of the types of work that are going to be eligible for this visa. And they also outline the areas in terms of their postcodes that will qualify for regional Australia. You know, you can't go an hour outside of Sydney and deem that to be regional. There's certain areas that have to qualify to be regional. So when I did my regional work, I was about 6 hours west of Sydney, and that was classified as regional. So what does 88 days actually mean? What does that look like in terms of a time frame? So you must have carried out at least 3 months of specified work. So if you're working full time, say Monday to Friday, 35 to 40 hours, the 88 days includes your days off, including your weekends. However, if you get part-time work, you must work 88 full days to be qualify for the 88 days. It can seem like a lot, but the 3 months, it actually goes very quickly, and we'll talk about how we can find, you know, a role that you're also going to enjoy doing. The 6 months, if you're on a second year working holiday visa, you actually have to do 6 months, or 179 calendar days of regional work. And I will just say also that for anyone who's coming over from Northern Ireland on a British passport, the Australian government did announce that from July 2024, that those people holding British passports will no longer need to do the 3 months regional work. However, it'll only apply for those people who put in their visa application, their original visa application, after that date. So if you know you're coming in the next couple of months, you're not going to be eligible for that. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of payment structures, so look, depending on the industry, so in terms of you know what type of work you can do, the majority of it is going to be farm work related. So whether that be fruit picking, whether that be harvesting, fishing, tree farming, you know, there's bushfire recovery work. So a lot of it is to do with the land. But then there are some regional areas that will allow for tourism and hospitality, but their areas are classified as very remote Australia. And then there's also construction in regional Australia, and also some mining. So look, depending on the industry, if you're going for farm work, a lot of the time it can be based on how productive you are. So for example, if you get a job banana picking, sometimes it can be, you know, your pay will be based on the weight that you're picking and how much you have picked. However, you still need to receive the minimum wage for this type of work. So you're still covered under that minimum wage agreement. The pay rates and conditions can vary. So sometimes you'll get paid weekly, sometimes it'll be monthly. You might be paid casually. You might be on a set wage per week. So just make sure that when you are engaging in employment, that you determine all of those different factors and make sure that you're not going to be, you know, badly off because of it. In terms of seasonal work, you do need to be prepared to travel. So because Australia is such a large country, we all experience different seasons at different times. So, you know, right now, coming into winter down in the snowy mountains of New South Wales, they're experiencing snow. Over, you know, up in the Northern Territory, they're coming into their dry season, whereas in summertime, it's their wet season. So you just need to be prepared to follow the harvest trail if that's the type of work that you're looking for. So there's a great website, the Harvest Search website, that'll tell you what is in season, where they're looking for workers. If a crop needs to be harvested, you know, the people might be really in need of people to travel. So just be prepared that you may not get the regional work in the location that you had potentially hoped, that you might need to go a little bit further afield, because there have been some reports of the regional work being quite difficult to get, but that could potentially be because where they're looking could be out of season. So where to find work. So look, there's a number of different places online. Seek has regional work. There's backpacker job boards, regional work, sa.gov.au. Gumtree is a really good one as well. Because a lot of the time, some of these farmers, they may not spend the time putting together like a very official recruitment page. So they might just put a message up on Gumtree saying that they're looking for staff. Some of the bigger kind of harvest towns in Australia, so for example, Mildura, down on the border between New South Wales and Victoria, they will actually have a lot of what's called working hostels, where these hostels have been built to house the workers on all of the surrounding farms. So they're called the working hostels. But then what ended up happening was the owners of the working hostels developed really good relationships with the farmers, and to a certain extent, then they were almost responsible for the hiring of the employees, and then they'd send their employees out to the farmers. So you can actually research the working hostels. You can start putting in phone calls. When are your key picking seasons? If not now, you know, when's it going to be? How long will the season last? And that's a really key one, because you don't want to arrive, you know, travel for 8 hours, then to find out that the season's only going to last another 4 weeks, and then you're going to have to pack up and then move on somewhere else. So try and get your 3 months done in the same place would be my advice. And then also don't forget to ask about the nature and cost of the hostel accommodation, because some might actually take their fee for having you stay with them out of your wage. So just make sure that that is well documented and you know what you're getting into. And I will just say, please do not try and scam the system. the Department of Immigration over here is one of the strictest government departments. And what some people have tried to do and failed, they have filled out their documentation for their 88 days. They said, yes, I have done 88 days, and they have hoped that the Department of Immigration won't verify this with their employer. However, they have been caught and they have been denied their second-year working holiday visa. So please, if you're planning on applying for this visa, do it legitimately, because you do not want to be caught by the Department of Immigration. They are a scary bunch of people. So how to apply for the visa? So you can do it all online. Allow roughly 3 to 4 weeks to get your visa processed, assuming everything is in correct order. If you apply in Australia, you must be in Australia to be granted your visa, and vice versa. So once you submit your application, you will be granted a bridging visa, and then this will extend your first year visa until your second year visa is granted. So final tips on regional work: apply in good time. Do not leave it until 3 months before your current visa is expiring. I would actually advise you to get your regional work out of the way as soon as possible. So obviously you want to come over here and get yourself set up, but I would start researching when is going to be the best time for me to go, and start looking into where those jobs might be. Make sure to have an open conversation with your prospective employer about wages, living conditions and safety protocols, because unfortunately we have heard some reports of, because this rural industry knows that working holiday visas are relying on this employment to see them through to the second year working holiday visa. You do not want to be exploited and you do not want to be taken advantage of. So make sure that you have an open and frank conversation asking what your wages are going to be, what your living conditions are going to be. You still are owed a quality accommodation, regardless of the type of work that you're doing, and safety protocols. Ensure your job is located in regional Australia, and you can check that postcode on the official immigration website. Take photos. So on the off chance that you submit your application and the Department of Immigration comes back and says, hold on, we just need to actually verify a few things with you. Were you definitely here? If you've taken photos, that can be counted as evidence and that you were where you said you were. And hold on to your pay slips. You never know. Everything could be above board and something could still just require that additional layer of checking from the Department of Immigration. So your pay slips is another great piece of evidence that you can provide. Ensure your employer is legitimate and that they're legally allowed to employ you, and get a payment summary that's showing all of the income that you earned through your time with that employer. And just to note, I know I mentioned kind of exploitation of employees, but there have been some kind of difficulties reported in terms of people being underpaid. Again, this is all to do with people taking advantage of your situation. Very hard manual labor, bad living conditions, and unfortunately some reports of sexual harassment. So please, what I would always say to people going to do their regional work, always let people know where you're going, how you can be contacted, because don't forget, a lot of these places in regional Australia may not have the same level of phone coverage. So maybe you might need to give a landline number that you can be reached on. Telstra as a phone company probably has the best coverage in regional Australia. But make sure people know where you're going, how to contact you, and check in with them and let them know that you're doing okay on a regular basis. It's not all bad, as I say. I had a great experience doing my regional work. I met some wonderful people, but you need to be savvy before going into it.
That's great. Thanks very much, Una. I'm conscious of time and people probably have lots of questions. So don't forget to be putting your questions in the chat box. We're just going to very quickly talk through how and why people run into difficulty, and then how you can get in touch with the Irish Support Agency when you're over in New South Wales.
Okay, everyone, I'm not going to keep you long. So look, as you can see on the slides here that you'll get a copy after, on some occasions, people can get into difficulty, and look, I'm not going to talk to them all, but I will speak to in particular the health here, because if you're coming out from home with an existing medical diagnosis or even a mental health diagnosis, my advice is just speak to your GP first, get a payment summary, make sure you've enough medication for the first few months at least to get set up, because if you are not eligible for Medicare out here, as we covered earlier, some medications can be very expensive. So look, do your research, and please feel free to get in touch with us directly if you are a bit concerned about that, and we'll try and guide you as best we can before you come here, because it's best to manage your expectations. So yeah, that's my main advice. Look, with gambling, there is a really different culture here. So sometimes it's very heavily promoted, and that's something that I see quite often coming through the agency, as well as alcohol and drugs. Look, be sensible. The police here are very strict, and I've been to court with young working holiday visas far too many times than I would like, because of things that have happened, unfortunately, when they've been under the influence. So look, keep all of this in mind, and yeah, please do reach out if you do get into any difficulty. Okay, and we'll just move to the next slide. So yes, support services when you're in Australia. So helplink.ie is a counselling service based in Ireland that's free for people, Irish people living abroad, that have mild to moderate concerns. Now, it is a short-term service, so it's not something you're going to be accessing, you know, for maybe 12 months at a time, but they are fantastic for those that may be feeling homesick and struggling with settling in. The Samaritans helpline is also a free phone one that we can see down below here, that links you to Samaritans back in Ireland. We have got counselling, and we've got Irish Australian mental health practitioners here. There's the mental health crisis line and lifeline. And look, we're more than happy at the Irish Support Agency to be your first port of call. As you can see, we do a lot of client support services. I'm the outreach worker, so I will meet you. I will have a chat with you over the phone if you're struggling to settle into Sydney and you need a little bit of tips. We do lots of work within the community with seniors, and there's lots of volunteer opportunities. And I touched earlier on our mental health and wellbeing supports at Dochas, and we run different events throughout the year for men and women. And two in particular that we've done in the past is Shoulder to Shoulder and Women for Women.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Katrina and Una. There's a lot of information there, and we can have some time now to go through some questions, but I just want to draw your attention to contact details for both the Irish Support Agency over in Sydney and ourselves over in Dublin. Before you're going, feel free to reach out to us. Same thing with Irish Support Agency. As Katrina said, there's so many resources that are available to you. I know we've gone through a lot of information today, but you will have the slides. You should be able to go through all this back again, and if when you're doing that you have further questions, just reach out to us. We're happy to help.